A corporate executive humiliated a young woman in front of an entire boardroom, dismissing her pitch as childish and ordering her to leave, only to realize too late she was the company's new owner. What unfolded next didn't just shatter his ego, it rewrote his future. The air inside the 47th floor conference room at Sterling Tower was sharp with the scent of polished wood and fresh coffee, the kind brewed for people who measured their mornings in deals, not minutes. It was 9:12 a.m. in downtown Chicago, and the skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows glittered under a cold November sun, all steel and glass reflecting ambition. Maya Ellis stepped off the elevator, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, a tailored charcoal blazer framing her frame with quiet precision. She carried a slim leather portfolio, no logo, no flash, just purpose. At 29, she moved with the kind of calm that made people pause, not because she demanded it, but because she didn't need to. The receptionist barely looked up, just pointed her toward the boardroom with a curt nod, assuming she was another junior analyst, or maybe someone's assistant. Maya didn't correct her. She never did. Outside the glass doors, a dozen executives milled about, their voices a low hum of numbers and egos, ties knotted tight, watches catching the light. The agenda was a $300 million merger, the kind that could shift market shares and make headlines. Maya pushed the door open, and the room didn't still. It churned. Eyes flicked her way, some curious, most indifferent, as she took a seat near the back, her portfolio unopened on the table. She wasn't here to blend in, but she wasn't here to perform either. She was here to listen, or so they thought. At the head of the table stood Richard Vaughn, 58, Chief Strategy Officer, a man whose voice carried the weight of 3 decades in boardrooms like this one. His suit was bespoke, his hair silvered just enough to signal wisdom, not age. He was mid-sentence, gesturing at a projected slide filled with graphs that danced like a victory lap. "We're not here to play safe," he said, his tone clipped, commanding. "This merger isn't a suggestion, it's a necessity." The room nodded along, a chorus of agreement, except for Maya. She leaned forward slightly, her pen tapping once, twice against her portfolio. Not loud, just enough to catch Vaughn's eye. He didn't like it. "Excuse me," he said, pausing, his gaze locking onto her like a hawk spotting something out of place. "Do you have something to add, or are you just here to take notes?" The room shifted, a ripple of smirks and side glances. Maya didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, low, like she was choosing her words from a place of strength, not defense. "I'd like to propose an alternative," she said. "Your merger assumes growth in sectors that are already oversaturated. I've run the numbers. Diversifying into renewable tech could double your returns in half the time." Silence, not the good kind. Vaughn's jaw tightened and a laugh, sharp and dismissive, broke from his lips. "Diversifying?" he repeated, as if she'd suggested selling lemonade on the sidewalk. "What is this, a college seminar? Who let her in here?" He turned to the room expecting laughter, and got it. Soft chuckles from men who'd learned to mirror his cues. Maya didn't move. Her eyes stayed on Vaughn, not cold, not angry, just unyielding. "I'm serious," she said. "I can show you the data." Vaughn's smile vanished. He stepped closer to her end of the table, his voice dropping to a patronizing drawl. "Sweetheart, this isn't a pitch competition. You're out of your depth. Why don't you grab a coffee and let the adults handle this?" A few gasps, quickly stifled. Someone coughed. Maya's fingers tightened around her pen, but her face didn't change. She opened her portfolio, slid out a single sheet, and placed it on the table. "My projections," she said, her tone still even. "Look at them before you decide I'm wasting your time." Vaughn didn't touch the paper. He leaned in, his voice now loud enough for the whole floor to hear through the glass walls. "You think you can waltz in here with a spreadsheet and lecture me? I've closed deals bigger than your entire career before you were born." He pointed at the door. "Out. Now take your little project and go." The room froze. A woman in a navy suit shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Maya stood, not rushed, not defeated, gathering her portfolio with the same care she'd carried it in. She looked at Vaughn, and for the first time something flickered in her eyes. Not hurt, not rage, but certainty. "You'll regret this," she said, so quietly it was almost a whisper, yet it landed like a blade. As she walked toward the door, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't answer it, not yet. Outside in the hallway, she paused by the elevator, her reflection sharp in the polished steel doors. The call was from her attorney, and she knew what it meant. The paperwork was final. 2 hours ago, she'd signed the last document transferring controlling shares of Sterling Enterprises, Vaughn's company, into her name. She'd bought it all, every desk, every deal, every ego in that room, through a series of silent moves over 6 months. And Vaughn, the man who'd just thrown her out, had no idea he'd just insulted the one person who held his career in her hands. What happened next wouldn't just be a reckoning. It would be a lesson no one in that skyscraper would ever forget. The elevator doors slid shut behind Maya, sealing her off from the boardroom's lingering echoes, Vaughn's mocking laugh, the shuffle of papers, the silence of those too comfortable to speak up. She stood alone in the mirrored box, her reflection steady, unblinking, as the numbers ticked downward. 47, 46, 45. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket, insistent now, but she let it hum. She wasn't ready to talk, not yet. The air felt cooler here, away from the boardroom's heat, and for a moment she closed her eyes, not in defeat, but to sharpen her focus. This wasn't her first time being dismissed, but it would be the last time anyone in this company dared to try. Back in the boardroom, Vaughn was already moving on, his voice booming again as he flipped to the next slide. "Let's not waste any more time," he said, waving a hand as if brushing away Maya's existence. The executives nodded, pens scratching, laptops glowing, all eager to realign with his rhythm. But something felt off, a faint crack in the room's polished surface. The woman in the navy suit, Claire, glanced at the door Maya had exited, her fingers pausing on her keyboard. She'd caught Maya's final words. "You'll regret this," and they hung heavier than they should have. Vaughn didn't notice. He was too busy steering the merger discussion, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath him was about to shift. Maya stepped out into the lobby, the marble floor stretching wide under a chandelier that cost more than most people's homes. She pulled her phone from her pocket, finally glancing at the screen. Emir, 3 missed calls. Her attorney. She tapped his name, and he picked up before the first ring finished. "Maya, it's done," he said, his voice low, urgent. "The board was notified 10 minutes ago. You're in control. 51% of Sterling Enterprises, effective immediately. They're expecting you to address them by noon." Maya didn't smile, but her lips twitched, just enough to hint at something resolute. "Good," she said. "And Vaughn?" Amir paused. "He's still in the dark. Nobody's told him yet." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket, her steps deliberate as she crossed the lobby toward a sleek black SUV waiting outside. The driver, a man with gray streaks in his beard, gave her a nod through the tinted window. Familiar, not formal. She slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her blazer, and leaned back as the car pulled into Chicago's morning traffic. Her portfolio sat beside her, unopened since the boardroom, but she didn't need to look at it. The numbers were in her head, memorized months ago when she'd first set her sights on Sterling Enterprises. Not because she wanted their name or their shiny tower, but because she wanted their reach, a platform to rebuild an industry that too often shut out people like her. Upstairs, the boardroom was hitting a snag. Claire raised her hand, tentative at first, then firmer. "Richard," she said, cutting through Vaughn's monologue about profit margins. "Who was that woman? She didn't seem like an intern." Vaughn snorted, loosening his tie slightly. "Some kid with a laptop and too much confidence," he said. "Probably thought she could impress us with a PowerPoint. Forget her." But Claire didn't. She opened her tablet, her fingers moving quickly, searching something she couldn't quite name. A few others exchanged glances, the kind that happen when doubt starts to creep into a room built on certainty. Vaughn pressed on, but his rhythm was faltering, like a song skipping beats. Maya's SUV rolled to a stop outside a small coffee shop, tucked between skyscrapers like a secret. She stepped out, thanking the driver with a quiet, "See you at 11," and walked inside. The barista, a young woman with a nose ring, grinned when she saw her. "The usual?" she asked. Maya nodded. Make it quick, Lena. She sat at a corner table, away from the window, and finally opened her portfolio. Inside was no ordinary pitch deck. It was a blueprint. Pages of data, timelines, and a single photograph clipped to the back. Her mother smiling in a faded denim jacket, standing outside a factory gate. That factory, shuttered a decade ago, had been Sterling's first acquisition. Maya had been 14 when it closed, watching her mother's pride erode with every job application that went unanswered. That was the spark. Not revenge, but a promise. Back then, Maya had been the kid who stayed up late, teaching herself code on a secondhand laptop, building apps for local businesses by 17, selling her first startup at 22. She didn't chase headlines, she chased leverage. By 27, she'd turned a string of quiet deals into a fortune nobody saw coming. Not flashy, not loud, but undeniable. Sterling Enterprises caught her eye not for its wealth, but for its arrogance, the way it swallowed smaller companies and spat out their workers. 6 months ago, she'd started buying shares through proxies, moving like a shadow until she held the reins. Today wasn't about proving a point. It was about taking the wheel. In the boardroom, Claire's tablet pinged. She froze, her eyes scanning a news alert that had just hit her inbox. Sterling Enterprises acquired in surprise buyout. New majority owner named. She clicked the link, and there it was. Maya Ellis, 29, tech prodigy, now the controlling shareholder. The photo showed her at a conference last year, speaking to a crowd of thousands, her expression calm but commanding. Claire's breath caught. She looked up at Vaughn, who was still talking, unaware that the article was spreading to every phone in the room. One executive coughed, another shifted in his seat. The air was changing, fast. Maya sipped her coffee, the steam curling around her face as she checked her watch. 10:15 a.m. She had an hour before returning to Sterling Tower, where the board was waiting and where Vaughn would finally learn the truth. Her phone lit up again, this time with a text from Amir. They're panicking. Vaughn's still clueless. Want me to send the memo now? Maya typed back. Hold off. I'll do it in person. She set the phone down and leaned back, her mind already 3 steps ahead. She wasn't thinking about Vaughn's face when he found out. Not yet. She was thinking about the factory her mother lost, the workers like her who deserved better, and the industry she'd reshape once Sterling was hers to steer. Back at the tower, Vaughn's presentation was unraveling. An executive interrupted, holding up his phone. Richard, you need to see this. Vaughn frowned, annoyed, but took the device. His eyes scanned the screen, and for the first time that morning, his confidence cracked. This can't be right, he muttered, scrolling faster. Maya Ellis? The girl from... He stopped, his face paling as the pieces clicked. The room went silent, every eye on him, waiting for a reaction he didn't have. Claire stood, gathering her things. I think we need to pause this meeting, she said, her voice firm now. Vaughn didn't argue. He couldn't. Maya stood outside Sterling Tower, the wind tugging at her blazer as she looked up at the glass facade. Her driver idled nearby, but she didn't move yet. She pulled the photo of her mother from her portfolio and held it for a moment, her thumb brushing the faded edge. Then she tucked it away, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the entrance. The board was waiting, the memo was ready, and Vaughn was about to learn what happens when you underestimate someone who's already won. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a shift that would ripple far beyond the 47th floor. The revolving doors of Sterling Tower swallowed Maya with a soft hiss, spitting her back into the lobby where the chandelier's light fractured across the marble like a warning. She moved past the receptionist, who now looked up with a flicker of recognition, or maybe nerves, and headed straight for the elevators. The air was different this time, charged as if the building itself sensed what was coming. Maya pressed the button for the 47th floor, her reflection in the steel doors sharper now, her charcoal blazer a quiet armor. She didn't check her phone, didn't fidget. Her portfolio was tucked under her arm, but it wasn't the numbers inside that mattered anymore. It was the weight of what she'd built, invisible to everyone in that boardroom until now. Upstairs, the conference room was a pressure cooker. Vaughn stood at the head of the table, his phone still in hand, the news alert's headline burning into his retinas. Maya Ellis, tech prodigy, takes control of Sterling Enterprises. His tie hung loose, one end dangling like a surrender flag he hadn't meant to raise. The executives were no longer listening to him. Some typed furiously on their laptops. Others whispered in pairs, their voices a low buzz of panic and calculation. Claire, the woman in the Navy suit, sat back, her arms crossed, watching Vaughn like she was measuring the distance he had left to fall. "This is a mistake," Vaughn said, more to himself than the room, his voice fraying. "She was here. That girl, she can't be the owner." The door swung open and every head turned. Maya stepped inside, her steps deliberate, her gaze sweeping the room like she was counting allies and liabilities. The silence was thick, the kind that makes your pulse loud in your ears. Vaughn's eyes locked onto her, wide then narrow, as if he could will her back into the box he'd built for her. An intern, a nobody, a mistake. "You," he said, the word half question, half accusation. Maya didn't respond right away. She set her portfolio on the table, the same spot where she'd left her projections an hour ago, and pulled out the chair she'd been forced to vacate. She sat, her movements unhurried, claiming the space like it had always been hers. "I'm Maya Ellis," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the room's haze. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, I own 51% of Sterling Enterprises. That means I own this table, this tower, and every decision you thought you were making without me." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes finding Vaughn's. "Including the one where you told me to get out." A murmur rippled through the room, not loud but enough to shift the air. Claire's lips twitched, not quite a smile but close. Vaughn's face reddened, his hands gripping the edge of the table like it could anchor him. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "You think you can just walk in here, throw around some shares and—" "I'm not throwing anything," Maya interrupted, her tone still even, but with an edge now, like a blade catching light. "I bought this company because it's broken, because people like you make decisions that hurt more than they build. I gave you a chance to listen, an hour ago, right here, and you chose to humiliate me instead." She opened her portfolio, not to show data, but to pull out a single document, its letterhead stark. Sterling Enterprises Board Resolution. She slid it across the table toward Claire, who took it without hesitation. "That's my directive," Maya said. "Effective immediately, I'm restructuring leadership. Starting with you, Richard." Vaughn laughed, but it was hollow, a reflex that didn't reach his eyes. "You can't fire me," he said. "I've been here 20 years. I built this company's strategy from the ground up. You're a kid playing with money you don't understand." The room waited, every breath held, but Maya didn't flinch. She tilted her head, just slightly studying him. "You built nothing," she said. "You managed what others created, and you did it by stepping on anyone who didn't look like you. I understand money just fine, enough to know you're not worth what you cost this company." She turned to Claire. "Read the resolution." Claire cleared her throat, her voice steady as she scanned the page. "The board acknowledges Maya Ellis as majority shareholder and approves her motion to remove Richard Vaughn as Chief Strategy Officer, effective immediately, with no severance." A gasp broke the silence, sharp and involuntary. Vaughn's hands fell from the table, his face a mask of disbelief. "No severance?" he repeated, his voice cracking. "You can't. This is my life." Maya met his gaze, unflinching. "You made it personal when you called me sweetheart and threw me out. I'm making it business now." The room was a graveyard of egos, every executive frozen, recalculating their own positions. Maya stood, her portfolio closed now, her presence filling the space Vaughn had once dominated. "This isn't about revenge," she said, addressing the room. "It's about accountability. Sterling Enterprises is going to change. How it operates, who it serves, what it stands for. If you're here to build something real, stay. If you're here to protect your own seat, you're already on borrowed time." She nodded at Claire, who handed the resolution to another executive, the paper passing like a verdict. Vaughn stumbled back, his chair scraping against the floor. "You'll regret this," he said, echoing Maya's earlier words. But they sounded weak now, desperate. Maya didn't respond. She didn't need to. The boardroom doors opened again, this time for two security guards, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Vaughn," one said, "we'll escort you out." Vaughn looked around, searching for an ally, a lifeline. but found only averted eyes and tight lips. He grabbed his phone, his briefcase, and walked toward the door, his steps heavy like a man carrying the weight of his own collapse. Maya watched him go, her expression unreadable. Not triumphant, not cruel, just resolute. She turned back to the room where the executives were now sitting straighter, their laptops closed, their attention hers. "We have work to do," she said simply, and opened her portfolio to a new page. A plan not for mergers, but for rebuilding, starting with the communities Sterling had once discarded. But as the boardroom settled into this new reality, Maya's mind drifted back to why she'd fought for this moment. A truth deeper than shares or titles, rooted in a promise she'd made long before she ever stepped into this tower. It was her mother's face she saw now, not as it was in the photo, but as it had been the day the factory closed, lined with worry, yet still holding on to hope. Maya had been 14, sitting at their kitchen table, watching her mother count bills they couldn't pay. "You're smarter than this world knows," her mother had said, tapping Maya's forehead. "Don't let them tell you what you can't do." That night, Maya had started coding, not for fun, but for survival, building apps that paid for groceries, then rent, then college. Every deal since, every startup, every silent acquisition, had been a brick in the foundation she was laying now. Sterling wasn't just a company to her, it was the system that had failed her family, and she'd bought it to fix it. By noon, word of Vaughn's exit was spreading. An intern in the break room tapped out a post on X. "Just saw the CSO escorted out of Sterling Tower." New owner Maya Ellis fired him in front of everyone. She's 29, a casual corporate shakeup. The clip, recorded by someone outside the boardroom's glass walls, hit the internet an hour later. Grainy footage of Maya standing at the table, Vaughn's face crumpling, the guards waiting. It wasn't viral yet, but it was climbing, shared by people who saw themselves in Maya's calm defiance, who knew what it felt like to be dismissed until you forced the room to listen. Maya didn't see the post. She was already in a smaller office down the hall, meeting with Claire and two other executives who'd stayed after the boardroom cleared. "I want a full audit of Sterling's layoffs from the past decade," she said, her pen moving across a notepad. "Every factory, every community we gutted, start there. We're not just chasing profits, we're rebuilding what we broke." Claire nodded, her hesitation gone, replaced by something like respect. "That'll take time," she said, "and it won't be cheap." Maya looked up, her eyes steady. Good things never are. Outside, Chicago's skyline was turning gold as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the tower. Maya's phone buzzed again, Amir, with a single text. "You're trending. Brace yourself." She didn't open the app, didn't read the comments piling up, the mix of praise and skepticism that always followed a moment like this. She was thinking about the next board meeting, the next factory she'd reopen, the next person who'd underestimate her and learn the hard way. Vaughn was gone, but he was just a symptom. The real work, changing how power looked, who it served, was just beginning, and Maya was ready to make it louder than any boardroom could contain. The small office down the hall from Sterling's boardroom was a far cry from the glass and marble spectacle upstairs. Its walls were plain, the desk cluttered with old reports, and the single window overlooked a slice of Chicago's skyline that felt more human than heroic. Rooftops, antennas, a glimpse of the river winding through the city's veins. Maya sat at the desk, her blazer draped over the chair's back, her sleeves rolled up as she pored over a spreadsheet Claire had pulled from Sterling's archives. The numbers told a story of shuttered factories, slashed budgets, and lives left behind. Each line a decision someone like Vaughn had signed off on without a second thought. She didn't look up when Claire stepped back in, a tablet in hand, her expression a mix of focus and something softer. Admiration, maybe. "The audit's underway," Claire said, setting the tablet down. "We've got teams pulling records from every major closure since 2010. It's a mess, Maya. Some of these deals were buried so deep it's like they didn't want anyone to find them." Maya nodded, her pen circling a figure on the spreadsheet. $47 million in payouts to executives during a year when 3 plants closed, costing 2,000 jobs. "They didn't," she said, her voice steady but carrying a weight that made Claire pause. That's why we're digging now. No more shadows. She pushed the spreadsheet aside and leaned back, her eyes meeting Claire's. What's the mood upstairs? Claire hesitated, choosing her words. Nervous. Half the board's rewriting their resumes in their heads. The other half's trying to figure out how to get on your good side. They're not used to someone like you, someone who doesn't play their game. Maya's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close enough to ease the tension. Good, she said. I'm not here to play. She stood stretching her shoulders and walked to the window, the city sprawling below like a map she was learning to redraw. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Amir again, with another text. Clips at 500K views. News outlets are calling. You want to talk to anyone? She didn't touch the phone, not yet. The world could wait. Outside, the internet was doing what it did best, churning a moment into a movement. The grainy video from the boardroom had spread beyond X, hitting news feeds and group chats, stitched into reaction videos with captions like 29-year-old CEO, school's corporate titan, and this is how you take over. Maya's line, you made it personal when you called me sweetheart, was looping in clips, quoted in threads, printed on screenshots that raced across platforms. Comments poured in, a messy mix of awe, anger, and the inevitable pushback. She's a legend for staying calm, one user wrote. Vaughn was just doing his job. Why ruin him? Another argued. A third, quieter voice stood out. I've been that woman, told I don't belong. She's fighting for all of us. Maya didn't see the comments, but she felt their weight, the way a room feels different when eyes are on you. She'd felt it before, not at boardroom tables, but in college lecture halls where professors skipped her raised hand, in pitch meetings where investors leaned toward her male co-founder, in elevators where security asked for her ID twice. Each time she'd swallowed the sting, turned it into fuel. Buying Sterling wasn't about erasing those moments. It was about making sure no one else had to endure them. She turned back to Claire, who was scrolling through her tablet, her brow furrowed. You should know, Claire said. Vaughn's not going quietly. He's been calling board members, trying to rally support. Says he'll sue. Maya's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened, like a lens snapping into focus. Let him try, she said. He's got no ground to stand on. The board resolution was airtight. Amir made sure of it. She paused, then added, but keep me posted. I want to know who picks up his calls. Claire nodded, tucking the tablet under her arm. You're really doing this, she said, almost to herself. Changing everything. Maya looked at her, steady, unflinching. Not everything, she said, just what's broken. Claire left the room, and for the first time that day, Maya was alone, the silence wrapping around her like a shield. She sat back down, pulling the photo of her mother from her portfolio. It was creased now, worn from years of being carried. But her mother's smile was still bright, defiant. Maya traced the edge with her thumb, her mind drifting to a memory she hadn't touched in years. Her mother coming home from the factory, hands rough from machinery, but always stopping to braid Maya's hair before dinner. You're my legacy, she'd say, her voice soft but sure. When the factory closed, that sureness faded, replaced by a quiet shame Maya swore she'd never let take root. She'd started coding that same year, not just to pay bills, but to build something no one could take away. Sterling was her biggest move yet, but it wasn't the end. It was the foundation. By evening, the story was no longer just a clip. A local news channel ran a segment, split screen, the boardroom video on one side, a photo of Maya from her last startup sale on the other. A stunning takeover, the anchor called it, raising questions about corporate culture and who gets to lead. They didn't get it quite right. Maya wasn't here to lead in their way, with corner offices and photo ops. She was here to rebuild, to open doors for the people who'd been locked out. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Lena, the barista. Saw you on the news. You're a badass. Maya smiled, the first real one all day, and typed back, just getting started. Back at Sterling Tower, the lights were dimming as employees trickled out, whispering about the day's events. In the parking garage, Vaughn sat in his car, staring at his phone, a draft email to a lawyer open but unsent. He'd called 6 board members. Only one answered, and even then, the conversation was clipped. Cautious. The reality was sinking in. His name, once a currency in these halls, was worthless now. He didn't understand Maya, not really. To him, she was an anomaly, a glitch in the system he'd mastered. But the system had changed, and he hadn't seen it coming. Maya left the office late, the city's pulse slower now, streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. She walked to her SUV, her driver waiting as always, but she paused before getting in, looking up at Sterling Tower one last time. The building loomed, its windows dark except for a few glowing floors, like eyes watching her back. She thought about her mother again, about the factory workers she'd meet next week, about the emails already piling up from people who saw the clip and felt seen. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs too. She slid into the car, the door closing with a soft thud. And as the engine hummed to life, she felt it. Not victory, not yet, but momentum.